Welcome into the Hot Read Podcast live for Wednesday, the 11th of September. My name is JT Ruhnke, host and beat writer here at Broadway Sports Media. You can follow me at JT_Ruhnke. I'm always joined by the lovely Stoney, Keeley, editor-in-chief at Sobros Network, 1/3 of the Football and Other F Words podcast, and writer over at stackingtheinbox.com. You can follow him at Stoney Keeley on Twitter. Stoney, you've blindsided me today. I thought we had a pact here going that this would be the show on the 440 network here that would not bend the knee to Paul Kuharsky's wishes, that we look formal on the show. But you show up today in the suit and tie here. Is this to attend the funeral of the Tennessee Titans 2024 season? Is that what we're doing here today?
Well, listen, it's the dawning of a new era here on 440 Sports. I feel like maybe we got off on the wrong foot with our teammate Paul Kuharsky, and I wanted a sign of solidarity that I stand with my teammate, okay? I've never been called a smartass. I've never trolled in my life. Dead serious, want to show solidarity. And yes, we might as well just attend the funeral of the Tennessee Titans. By the way, I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but I've gained so much weight since I've had to wear these. I can't even get the top buttoned anymore. I've just lived in this cave of filth for the last 8 years of my life, just watching tape, watching the Tennessee Titans. And when I go to put on a tie, I cannot fit in it anymore. So it's, sad day.
I think you look great though. Either way,
thank you. But luckily the microphone hides my my fat neck, so I think we're good.
There you go. Just finding ways to make that camera show your best side there. Well, we are here to not just talk about ties and suits. We are here to talk about the Titans 24-17 roller coaster of a loss to the Chicago Bears to end the season. And like we said earlier, the season's over, and it's over. There's no point in continuing to talk about the Titans. No, of course, it's just one game. Everybody can take a deep breath as we talk about what surely it was a game. I wouldn't call it a good game. Most people have been calling it a horrendous game, but I do think there were some. It was a weird game. Yes, I think there were some good things that happened in their loss to Chicago that I think we can build upon and talk about kind of what looking through kind of this disappointing loss here. What exactly is the identity of this team going to be going forward? And like Brian Callahan said, what can we expect from this team when they clean up the mistakes? And I think, to start off the show here, I think the bottom line of this game that the Titans played on Sunday is that the other shoe finally dropped. I think after an offseason of hype, after everything going so well, you knew one way or another the shoe was going to drop, and this Titans team was going to have to face some sort of adversity. Now, the size of that shoe and how fast that shoe was going to drop, I think was debatable, but it just so happened that it was a massive shoe and it dropped absolutely immediately onto this team. And whether that is a good thing or not, I think is up for debate. But I think it's now an important topic to see how Brian Callahan, as the rookie head coach in his first loss, in what is a really, really bad loss for his first ever game, how he bounces back and how he rallies his troops going into this week where you have the home opener against another team who also had super high expectations, not both nationally, but with their fan base as well. Now they're coming to you after, kind of laying a goose egg against the 49ers last night. How does your team respond to that?
Yeah, I think it's a tough spot to be in for the Titans. And honestly, JT, I feel like we had a pretty good, we had our fingers on the pulse of this game on Friday. I think if you watch it back, there are a lot of things that we talked about that came to fruition in this game. I think we had two massive blind spots in the fact that Brian Callahan is still a rookie head coach. And that was part of the issue in the second half, were not as many screen calls, maybe not running the ball as effectively, maybe not changing things up enough to hang with the Bears, who adjusted pretty well on defense. And maybe letting that lead slip away from him a little bit. I think the optimistic take on that front is that he is a rookie head coach that's still kind of learning the ropes and finding his footing beneath him. I think Will Levis was pretty bad too, and I don't think that you and I had counted on that, because from what we'd seen all summer, I felt like we were kind of beyond some of the mistakes he was making, and it sounded like from Brian Callahan's press conference, he thought Will Levis was kind of beyond some of those mistakes as well. He mentioned reverting to a couple of bad habits in the game. I think those two things greatly impacted the outcome of this game. We just assumed that special teams under Colt Anderson were going to be better. They were not on Sunday. Otherwise, I think you and I had a pretty good grasp on this game. But now that you lose in that fashion, I mean, you're in week one, and you are already putting your locker room in a situation where they've got to dig out of this funk, because this is a weird one. And it's one that, if you listen to Titans Talk Back on 104.5 The Zone, Kevin Dyson was talking about it from the perspective of the player. This is one you think about. This is one you get to the end of the season and you're looking back at it like, dang, I can't shake that from my mind. This is the first week to have this abject failure, this outright disaster. And now you're going to take on a team that has a pretty good defense, a veteran quarterback who admittedly didn't look like MVP Aaron Rodgers on Monday Night Football, but he's still a veteran quarterback, that a team that is in a similar position to you that's going to come into this game pretty pissed off, and suddenly your backs are against the wall and you've already dug yourself a hole. Not an ideal way to start this season.
It was definitely not an ideal way to start this season. And as maybe it's par for the course for a lot of Titans fans, as AJ just says in the comments here, God hates the Titans. You know, and maybe this is something that a lot of people expected. Kenneth saying, I'm furious. Literally the last thing you guys talked about last week was don't do this hero ball stuff. Stop. And that's what Will Levis did in that game. But hey, you know, if Titans fans are in fact wallowing in their sadness after that game, I know what could, you know, help out here. And that is our proud sponsors, Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you know 440, you know them. We are proudly brought to you by Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages. If you are not privy to this wonderful liquor store and their sister location, we are happy to introduce you. Thank you once again to Sinkers Beverages for sponsoring the show. We will discuss more about them later to get your, you know, your Titans cures and your fixes later on in the show. But I think that brings up a really good point, what you said about Will Levis and Brian Callahan kind of trying to bounce back. And that is what happened in this game to shape the identity of what this team wants to do consistently going forward. We talked about, you know, at least Brian Callahan talked a lot about those small mistakes that ended up, you know, costing them the game this week. And, you know, outside of that, he believes that a lot of things did go right. And so looking at the offensive side of the ball first, I think it's important to have a discussion about what the offensive identity of this team looked like in Chicago, what worked, what didn't. And I think the biggest thing that you have to start with, if you look at this offense as an overall unit, is that they're young, and they're even younger. Inexperience is the name of the game with this team. We saw some good, we saw some bad. You look at Will Levis, as Kenneth said in the comments, making boneheaded plays throughout the entire game, still learning how to be that starter. You know, Brian Callahan talked about, you know, coaching some of those bad habits out of him. You know, he said it's kind of like having kids. And that's exactly like what Will Levis and a lot of the guys did on this game, you know, getting into that real first live action and, you know, being, you know, reverting back to some of those old habits is something that Brian Callahan, you know, makes that metaphor and makes the connection there that sometimes kids just do what kids do. And, you know, you just have to continue coaching it out of them. And so Will Levis showed that he still is, even though he is the starter, he is very young in this league, only 10 starts now under his belt. There's so much more room for improvement for him. JC Latham, you know, we talked a big game about him all offseason, but he looked like a rookie. He had some really nice plays sprinkled throughout, but there were a lot of plays that just make you go, yep, that's the inexperience right there. showing through that JC Latham still has a lot more to work on and a lot more to get to before he can be this, all-star Pro Bowl left tackle that we think he can be. You look at Brian Callahan from the rookie play calling perspective. He says in his first kind of, sit down after the game, looking back and reviewing the film, seeing I could have called this or I could have called that better. That's something that Brian Callahan did for the first time. And then even though they aren't quite young or as young as some of these other guys on the team, Ridley, Tyler Boyd, Tony Pollard, all are new into this offense and playing football for real for the first time. They all lacked consistency in this game. So I think when you look at the offensive identity of this team right now, it's young. And with that descriptor, it comes with the inexperience and the mistakes that you saw in that game. These are things that I think you look at this team, and in hindsight, you say, these are things we probably could have seen coming with how young, inexperienced, and not gelling this team is.
Yeah, and I think the positive spin on that is that they damn near won this game, even having these mistakes and the youth. I think you talk about Will Levis. I think the things that are concerning about him are that the issues that plagued him in this game are issues that popped up even going back to the Kentucky tape. Sensing pressure, drifting in the pocket, like just the presence there led to a fumble on a play. And the hero ball that we talked about led to the interception, the pick six that virtually sealed the game for the Bears. I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this week as well, but I noticed him kind of staring down receivers a little bit too in the passing game, getting guys open downfield and just not seeing them. And again, we have to qualify this with, I don't have the playbook. I don't know what the read is. It doesn't look like it's a situation where he's supposed to just focus on one wide receiver or something like that. So I'm making an educated guess here, but there were instances where, for instance, Calvin Ridley is wide open against the zone. He did it several times where he just found the sweet spot and would be wide open. And Will Levis just never even looked his way because he's focused on like the quick 10-yard out route to Tyler Boyd or something like that. It was very frustrating. It very much felt like, oh shit, this is a different speed than what we've been playing at this summer. And it was the same for JC Latham, who I felt was really inconsistent in his pass sets. He was undersetting, oversetting, and Chicago's edge rushers just had a field day with that, man. Like setting too far out and opening up the inside to a counter, or not setting deep enough and losing the edge. But it was still an issue that the offense as a whole could overcome, and they were still in the game because the defense was playing so well. So I think you can be hopeful about some of these things, but I had thought watching that game live, and this is where the source of the disappointment, the frustration for me came from, was that this whole thing was just a matter of how soon can things click for this Titans offense, because once they click, then this team could be really good. They've got the personnel to be really good if they can stay healthy and avoid facing those depth issues that we've talked about. And so when they go up 17 points, I'm sitting there thinking, dang, they've clicked in the first half of the first game. Like, we're on, let's go Super Bowl, baby, in February. And then it all just came crumbling down in the second half. So I think I texted you guys in the group chat on Sunday night, and I still believe it after watching the All 22. I don't think this is the last of the dumb shit that we're going to see this team do as it continues to figure itself out and find its identity and get its feet beneath them, get their sea legs under them.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you there. And I think one of the big comments here from Jacob saying, does Levis get a pass for being young? This is stuff he worked on all offseason with reps as the starter. I don't think so. And when I say when I say that this team is young, I don't mean like every player is super young. I think it's more young as an NFL player, more inexperience of just playing football. Will Levis, of course, he's 25, 26-ish. Like, he is not just this young, spry rookie. He has a lot of, age underneath him, but in terms of NFL playing experience, he has as much as, like a Bryce Young, who is, 3 to 4 years younger than him. So they're kind of, when you look at it from an NFL experience level, I think they're kind of on the same page. But when you look at it from an age, yes, the mechanics and things like that, I think, do not get a pass because of where he is.
Well, JT, let me tell you something. As an old man, you're still a young fella. You have your whole life ahead of you. I'm 1 foot in the grave here at 38 years old. I think that the older you get, the harder it is to unlearn bad habits, to work yourself out of them. And so I think that's one area of concern for Will Levis, is the capacity to change, right? Because everything comes down to a fraction of a second on the NFL field. You see entire careers that come down to a few bad plays, a few bad games, that sort of thing. Like, time matters. You don't have a lot of time in the NFL to get your stuff right. And at his advanced age, at 25 years old, I do wonder, seeing him revert to these bad habits on the field, if that is a factor in this, and if it is something that we should be concerned about when trying to project Will Levis as the long-term franchise quarterback for this organization.
Yeah, I think that that's something that definitely needs to happen a lot more quick than it is right now. And I think that's something that Brian Callahan talked to yesterday, especially thinking about the way that they are going to kind of play call and scheme up Will Levis, I think, is another part of this identity that for this team, at least, that I think it's going to be interesting to see if what we saw on Sunday is really what the Titans are going to try to do. I know we talked about on Friday's show about how much, play action we might see them play on Sunday, as that is kind of how we've seen Will Levis really be able to look consistent and look good in this offense. Well, quite the opposite really happened on Sunday. And Zach Lyons over at 104.5 The Zone and your co-host on Football and Other F Words kind of charted exactly what they were doing on Sunday. He says the Titans ran 61 plays yesterday, including sacks by his count, 35 pass plays from shotgun, 92.1% pass rate, scrambles included here as well. 13 designed runs from shotgun, 56.5%, 78.7% of plays from shotgun, and 13.2% play action rate overall. So it ended up being a lot different than we really would have expected. And I think when Brian Callahan was asked about that yesterday, he ended up saying that it ended up being more game script related than, anything else. He made the point that, when you are behind the sticks like that, second and 8, third and 8, second and 12, you're not going to be fooling a lot of people when you go under center and try to do play action there. And Brian said, to be frank, he would like it not to be that skewed. And I think that's something that with Will Levis's, with his inexperience, like you said, and his ability to kind of make those boneheaded plays, when you are, in those positions where you're 2nd and 7+, that's where I think you're going to see a lot more of that with Will Levis. And so I think the identity of this offense right now is to minimize those types of plays for Will Levis, being so far behind the first down marker, being able to play that play action and create a little bit more time for him, because like we saw, when you have to play more from shotgun like that, you're not having as much time for JC Latham and these tackles. You're not giving them the exact time and looks that they need to keep Will Levis safe. And that's where Will Levis starts to feel that pressure. And that's where those mistakes come from.
It's a twofold issue that's compounded here, by the way, JT. Sorry, my computer is in the corner just making bonkers beeping noises. I don't know what's going on. So if y'all can hear it, just let me know. I'll go unplug this thing if I have to. But I think the issue with the shotgun snaps is compounded because you're not having success on 1st and 2nd down. So you are in clear passing situations, which tells the defense, hey, we're going to rush the passer. Like, we are in a pass rush situation. That is set before the ball's even snapped. But then when you see that your rookie left tackle is struggling at the edge, and NPF, I thought, had an okay game, but he was beat around the edge as well. And you're seeing that, and you're saying, hey, let's widen these edge rushers out. Let's widen these defensive ends out. And we have a straight path to the quarterback. It's easier, more direct to get to him because he's already back. And you're putting the onus on your tackle at that point to meet the edge rusher out in space. And so when you do that, if you're an edge rusher, hey, they're about to throw the ball I'm going for the quarterback. My job is simple. And their tackle, who has been struggling at the edge this game, he's going to have to be the one to come out and meet me out in space and try to stop me. And if he does that, I might open up an inside lane. And it felt like the Bears did a masterful job of managing that pressure in the second half. It really did feel like they knew what the Titans were going to do. And I think a lot of that were the mistakes, but also the lack of success on first and second down in the second half of the game that forced them into those situations. It's like you're sitting at the poker table showing everybody your cards kind of deal.
And I think Brian Callahan commented on that yesterday, just, or after the game, being frustrated to the point of, with the offense and how they could not find any answers in that second half. The adjustments that Chicago made really kind of stifled their whole plan of attack. And so when you had to make those adjustments, that's where you started to see Will Levis really struggle, being able to, you know, and I think that's also a concern here, is that when things don't go the way Brian Callahan and this offense want them to, once they start to adjust and those things don't work, how is Will Levis going to counter that adjustment and be able to continue playing at the rate that they were playing before? We saw, especially in that first half, with how much they ran Tony Pollard, how much they were cooking up design looks, whether it be Traylon or Tony Pollard or Chigakonkwo in that first half. You saw them be a lot more complex in the first half, but when the adjustments came out, it really felt like they were trying to be more one-dimensional, and you saw that Will Levis type of play where he was kind of reverting back to last year, just trying to fit the ball in wherever the first read was. And that's something that I think we're also going to have to see Will Levis get better at, and something that's going to have to continue to be coached up here, especially when you come into a game there's been talk about how much, the New York secondary or the New York front seven may not be as fearsome as people thought, but that secondary is the real deal. And so that's going to be one of the biggest things here in this game upcoming, is that can Will Levis, when things start to not work and the wagon starts to break down, can he kind of, sink or swim? And I think that was a comment that was brought up. Can you, when you face that adversity in a game, can you sink or swim? And I think that's something that Will Levis is going to have to prove to us in the next coming weeks.
Yeah, I do too. Now, I think the bright side of all this is I do think if you watch the first half, you can glean what this Titans offense is going to look like. And something that I've been preaching all summer, I know you've been in on the train with me, that 12 personnel running power, man, they did it. And Tony Pollard goes for a touchdown. It looked good. It was executed perfectly. It was blocked perfectly, and it led to an explosive play. I thought they had a really good plan against Chicago's zone defense. Something that you and I talked about on the Hot Read podcast on Friday is how Chicago just like to drop 7 and clog up the throwing lanes. I think they were doing a lot of that in the first half. And Brian Callahan was calling plays. The receivers were stretching down the field, pushing that zone coverage back because the Bears like to keep it in front of them. And they were running a lot of stuff that broke out, broke in, or just stop, curl, come back, that sort of thing, where they could push that coverage back until they were ready to break. And when they broke, they were open. And I was watching some of that on the All-22 and thought, man, this is the vision. This is really smart. They are attacking this defense exactly like JT and I thought they would. It was just a matter of execution, protection, holding up, and that sort of thing. So I think when you look at the identity of this team and what we can glean from this game, the silver lining, so to speak, is that a lot of what we talked about, we expected from this team, they ran with success. It's just a process of eliminating mistakes, and for Will Levis not reverting to those old disastrous issues that I think are the biggest factor in why the Titans lost this game.
Yeah, I agree. And before we get to the defensive side of the ball, let's look at some of these comments here. Kenneth says, question to JT and Stoney: if the Titans are going to increase Levis pass attempts, do you trust Levis to throw more? I need multiple turnover-free games to get that trust in him back. And I think in this first game, you saw them, even kind of outdid my expectations. I believe it was 32 total pass attempts for Will Levis. Now, if they would have been still in the lead in that game, would it have gotten that high? I don't think so. I think you would have probably saw him around, 26, 27 pass attempts in that game if they were still up on the Bears. I think it's a really interesting question because it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, if you want this offense to work the way you thought it was, you're going to have to pass. But the downside is that right now you have Will Levis passing the ball, and if he's going to continue to not show this growth that we thought we would see, then how much do you really trust?
Yeah, I think, sorry, you froze up there on me, JT. I think as far as the trust goes, I think the context of the throws is important as well. Do I trust Will Levis throwing deep bombs to Calvin Ridley based off of that first game? No, I don't. But I do think that he did a manageable job with some of the short stuff to the flat and underneath kind of deal. I thought he was okay there. I thought they were pretty balanced on Sunday, and it was 32 pass attempts to like 26 rushing attempts, if I'm not mistaken, something like that. I kind of think that's more the norm of what we should expect from this offense. It's not the volume of throws necessarily, it's the quality of throws. I think it's a completion percentage thing, it's an efficiency thing. Can he take the underneath stuff, the screens, the short passes, and how do you stack those plays to set up the deep shots, and can he execute upon those? So as far as like the short mid-range stuff that's designed well, blocked well, executed well, all that stuff, I think I do have a high level of trust in him to take those plays. It's when the play breaks down that I lose faith, and it's when they start dialing up these deep shots that he was pretty inconsistent on Sunday that I start to lose a little bit of my faith.
Yeah, Jake in the comments here says, sometimes kids do what they do, and Tyreek Stevenson just spanked that child. So hopefully he learns his lesson. I think that's going to be it is a funny metaphor, but it will be interesting to see how, we talked about the first couple drives of this game and how important those were going to be. They ended up being complete duds for both teams, but Tennessee was able to finally kind of break out of that shell first, and they really were the only team to break out all day on offense between the two teams. Now coming into this game, it kind of feels the same way, right? How do you respond to the inefficiencies of that second half offense last week? Do you come out guns a-blazing like, with your home crowd and kind of prove people wrong, saying, hey, we still have this under control, we're still a team that can operate with Will Levis as our quarterback? Or will we see a lot more of this kind of slow kind of crawl to the beginning of a game before they really get warmed up and are able to break out of their shell? That's, I think, one of the biggest things that we'll have to see in this next game. And that's going to be the biggest tell to see, how much of this coaching is actually getting through to the players.
Yeah, and I think that's the concerning thing, that's one of the concerning things when you talk about going into week 2, is that we heard Brian Callahan saying that the youth on offense was a factor in how he called the game on Sunday. So you're thinking like he's already taken into account these guys are young, I want to get them settled in and everything, and they're still making these catastrophic mistakes. It's like, what do you do from there? Like, if you're already at like the foundational building block stuff, like you've got the training wheels on, can you just put like another set of training wheels on to help them? I don't know. Like we can get a little nihilistic with this thing too if we think about it from that perspective. It's like, I don't know how you combat that. I don't know how if it is just a situation where you really are back to basics in the practice and you're just hammering it in, you're just repetition, all that sort of stuff. Like it's kind of harrowing to think about when you talk about it like that.
It does feel a little bit like with this team right now, it's like if this week kind of falls the same way as the first week, we may have a conversation of just trying to like bash your head into a wall until it finally works. Like it feels like it could get to that point. But I think that, as the coaches as Brian Callahan kind of said, it felt to him at least that it was a lot of those first game, getting back into the rhythm of things. And that's where those old habits end up not being, those old habits end up not or coming back and are not gone. And so I think this week you're going to want to see, can they actually kind of play this offense the way this new Titans want to, instead of kind of reverting back to what we saw a lot of last year, especially for Will Levis.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I agree with that. I think there's a little bit of soul searching to do in that room, and you hope that they get it sorted out if you're a Titans fan, because if we see a lot of regression, if we see the mistakes continue, I don't know what the trajectory of this team looks like in 2024.
Well, we can make the transition here. It may still be on the upward swing, because on the defensive side of the ball, I think the identity there is that they are who we thought they were, and that is the potential to be a top 5 defense in the league here. I think you finally were able to see guys like T'Vondre Sweat and Jeffrey Simmons play together. Wow, they were exactly as advertised, putting those two guys together. T'Vondre Sweat in week 1 had a 77.7 PFF grade, which was second amongst defensive rookies, an 81.8 pass rush grade, second among all defensive interior players, and then a 16.7% pass rush win rate. You look at a lot of the tape from that game, and you see that what we thought would happen when you put Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat together happened, in that fact that you can double team one of them, but you can't double team both of them. And so when you saw Jeffrey Simmons kind of getting the majority of the work, T'Vondre Sweat was able to absolutely bully his one-on-one matchup and get into the backfield. Vice versa, you look at the other side, T'Vondre Sweat taking 2 guys on Jeffrey Simmons, leaving him one-on-one is not a great idea either. And I think that's something that no matter who they're going to play this season, that's going to be a problem for every single team until they figure out a way to kind of put 2 offensive linemen on both of them. But until we see that they're going to be a problem up front.
Yeah, and the surprising thing too for a lot of folks was that Sebastian Joseph Day had a good game. Keandre Coburn had a good game. The depth was there. Even when Sweat and Simmons came off the field, they were still able to generate that interior pressure, which is how I thought this defense would function. I wrote a piece about it on Stacking the Inbox. Interior pressure, blitzing from the linebackers, not really knowing who's coming from where. We saw a lot of that from Denard Wilson, and then coverage on the back end. But that first foundational piece, the basis for this thing being that interior pressure. And I don't think T'Vondre Sweat could have had much better of a debut without actually getting some sacks and posting some numbers in that column. But it was more than just the run stuffing big guy that they couldn't stop. You saw his hands on display, very finesse moves like the chopping, the swiping, the swim move, a robust pass rush toolkit on display that he was able to use to generate pressure. And it wasn't just a gap eating run stuffer like a lot of the haters would have said. This was a guy that impacted the passing game. It looked like Texas Longhorns tape. Like, that's the craziest thing to me, is that it's week 1, it's game number 1, and we're seeing the T'Vondre Sweat that so many of us watched on the Texas tape, and it doesn't look like he's missed a beat. It looks like this is translated to the NFL, and if he keeps on this path, it's not going to be like that every single week. I did, by the way, we talked about it on Friday, I did notice on the first play of the game, the Bears run the ball. They double team T'Vondre Sweat, get a guy into his side and get him moving sideways, and it opened up a run lane, but the play didn't go for very far because Jeffrey Simmons was loose. Kenneth Murray had a great game on Sunday. Like, guys were making tackles. The tackling effort from this defense was really well. So a symbiotic relationship. The defensive line had a great game, but a lot of the pieces around him were great too.
Yeah, I think when you think about what the Titans were trying to do in their game plan for Denard Wilson was getting that interior pressure to make a guy like Caleb Williams, who's playing his first real, actual mattering, NFL game ever, make him squirm a little bit in the pocket, and that's exactly what they did. And like you said, not just Jeffrey Simmons and T'Vondre Sweat got in on the action. I mean, the 2 guys who made the biggest tackle for loss on Caleb Williams on the 19-yard sack was Keandre Coburn and Sebastian Joseph Day. Those were the guys who were getting that pressure and were making Caleb kind of freak out in the pocket and look nervous in there. And so I wonder that with that, you talk about it might not happen every single week, but you kind of look at Caleb Williams and his inexperience in the pocket there at the NFL level. And then you translate it to next week, where you have a geriatric Aaron Rodgers, who, if you look at him last week, barely taking 5 steps back in the pocket. I wonder how much of that is going to continue to translate there. And then you even look at the secondary, which, because of the interior pressure they were getting off on Sunday, it was a great effort by a lot of them. We can talk about the rookie Jarvis Brownlee Jr., who was playing some time, who got some meaningful snaps in this game as well. But him, L'Jarius Sneed, Roger McCreary, Cheeto, when he played, although I want to note that I think he did look a little bit limited in that game, for better or for worse. He did have that questionable designation, but I think that's why we saw a lot more of Jarvis Brownlee Jr., because he was kind of on a little bit of a pitch count. But you see those guys making plays, and then the safety guys in Monty Hooker and Quandre Diggs. These guys were all playing that style of Denard Wilson defense that we expected them to play. And so when we talk about identity of this defense going season long, it's that if this defense plays like they did today, the Titans offense and Will Levis kind of, making some of those boneheaded mistakes, if he can limit them to less than like 3 a game, they're going to have a shot to win every game that they're in.
Yeah, and the layer that I would add to this, JT, that you and I haven't talked about yet, is there's a piece of this defense that really felt, once we got to meaningful game action and could see it in action, there was a piece of this thing that just felt like everybody on this defense is expected to do everything. You've got to defend the run. You've got to defend the pass. If you're on the field, we're going to have you doing a little bit of everything. Jarvis Brownlee, how about him beating Darnell Wright's block on that screenplay? How about Jack Gibbons covering the flat, getting out in space and making a tackle, blowing a play up? Roger McCreary running down screens as well. They rushed him on a play. They rushed Amani Hooker on a play. Kenneth Murray was lined up at edge on a play as well. Like, the versatility in their formations, their personnel groupings, it really, I'm watching the all 22 and I'm trying to put together a pattern. Like, okay, what does it mean when this person's there and then that person's never there again, kind of deal? Like, it's almost like solving a puzzle. And I can't imagine having to do that as a rookie quarterback coming from the Pac-12 and trying to figure that defense out. It felt like such a huge sigh of relief to see everything that we thought this defense could be executed well, and then adding that layer to it and thinking, wow, this could be even more than we thought. So great, commendable effort on defense.
Yeah, I think I saw a comment earlier that said we really about to lose Denard Wilson after 1 year as a head coach, because of the way he made a statement out there on the defensive side of the ball. Hey, if you're just joining us here, thank you for joining in. If you're watching us on Twitter, either on the Hot Read Podcast Twitter feed or the 440, do us a favor, head on over to the Broadway Sports Media or 440 Sports YouTube channel and join the conversation over there like so many of you have. We'll get to your comments just here in a little bit. But before we do that, have to once again thank our wonderful sponsor, Sinkers Beverages, who have been serving East Nashville for the past 4 decades, and they're still going strong. They are 3-time Best of Nashville Liquor Store of the Year. You can join the in-crowd for special benefits, allocations, events, weekly tastings. You get an email whenever they have brand new things in stock, whether it's your beer, your spirits, or your wine fix that you need after a Titans game just like that. You got to go out there to East Nashville, because they have anything to raise and lift your spirits after a Titans game like that. You can follow them on all of the social platforms at Sinkers Bev, and you can search Sinkers on Uber Eats and have the booze delivered to your house. If you are, after that Sunday loss, kind of wallowing in your sadness, hey, you don't have to go out to get your alcohol fixed, because you can just search them on Uber Eats and they drive so that you can drink. Also have to give a shout out to Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville, their sister liquor store. They've been serving that local community for over 50 years. Local businesses supporting local businesses. Shop local at Sinkers Beverages or Bluegrass Beverages in Hendersonville. Okay, Stoney, I think we do have to kind of give out some awards this week, good or bad, to this Titans performance. Kind of get into the weeds a little bit about certain players who I think really caught our eye in this week 1. the studs and duds of this game this week, starting with the studs here. I think we have to finally give a shout out to Chika Okonkwo, who, better for worse, finally kind of showed up. I do think I liked, it was a limited capacity of how they were using him. He went 2 for 15 on 2 targets, and then a touchdown, with one of those being that very acrobatic play in the back of the end zone. His ability to kind of rotate his body and fall into that ball when he's covered like that, I thought was kind of the Chika Okonkwo I think we've all been waiting to see. And the way that they used him in this game, I thought was something that we were kind of waiting to see happen in a real game. And so I think Brian Callahan found a way to use him really effectively, and he had himself a game and made a major impact.
Man, the Josh Wiley tight end 1 campaign really died a hard death on Sunday, I think. But I thought Chig had a great all-around game. By the way, we said somebody could score a touchdown on Tyreek Stevenson. Chig Okonkwo scored the touchdown on Tyreek Stevenson. We're just going to brush the part where I said it would be Treylon Burks under the rug and forget that. I was right about that. That's what I'm going to claim. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But yeah, the acrobatic catch in the end zone. He also was really good in the blocking game. There were a couple of plays where, you're designed as the tight end to hit the edge and clear out whoever pops up in that hole. And I thought he sealed it great. Sprung Tony Pollard for a big play on a couple of times. And then there was another play that he got behind the safeties, and Will Levis wasn't even looking his way. Now, you could say, like, a lot of that stuff, you line up in line on the formation, and you're designed to just kind of take the safeties with you. It's a clear out route. You're not really a read in the progression. But on the play, Chig Okonkwo raises his hand like, hey, I'm open. And I think, would he be doing that if he wasn't supposed to be getting the ball? I don't know. Again, reckless speculation on the show, but it looked like he left what would have been a touchdown on the field there as well. So I thought it was an all-around good game for Chig. Great start to the season.
Yeah, another guy who had a great start to the season is Tony Pollard, who I thought, for my money's worth, looked like the old Tony Pollard that we saw the year before his leg injury. I think this is something that we talked about as well. As much as they wanted to establish the run, we had to talk about how it may be Tony Pollard's backfield to lose, because this is the year after the year. And boy, did he look really, really good. I think there was talk, with Brian Callahan after the game and yesterday about, would you like to see Tyjae get a little bit more in this running game? I think, and he said, yes, of course. But when you look at what Tony Pollard can do on the ground like that, you kind of force yourself into riding the hot hand here. And even though Tyjae has been effective and was effective in a lot of aspects of the game on Sunday, Tony Pollard looked really, really solid and looked like he can be this kind of, 3 down back that if you so choose to have him do that.
Yeah, and he was very decisive as a runner. I think that's a style that he and Spears both possess. You give him a lane, he's gonna hit the hole hard. And he accelerated on the touchdown. He accelerated on another big run where he was run down from behind because the linebacker didn't get blocked up. But I think the encouraging thing is that that's where you still see the same Tony Pollard, is that decisiveness, that acceleration, the wiggle. He's got that compact frame. He can get between bodies, make some plays. I do think that we're probably going to see more of a timeshare. I don't know if that was necessarily by design on Sunday that we saw so much Tony Pollard. It could be a situation where the offense rides the hot hand, probably the best thing to do. But I do think that Callahan's comments about Spears being more involved in the future were insightful, because I don't know that it was the intention to get Pollard so much run, but man, he looked good doing it. So you can't blame him for sticking with him.
Right. I think it just so happened to be that in that first half, when you have Tony Pollard just breaking those runs and having such good drives, why take him out? Right. And I think that's something, even though you would like to see more of a 50-50 split, I do think there's a discussion to be had that every single game you could see next week, you could see Tyjae Spears totally go off next week, because he just ends up being the hot hand, and he's a guy who this Jets defense has no answers for. I think, though, when you look at this Jets defense, you look at what happened last night with Jordan Mason, and you say to yourself, this rushing attack has the chance to absolutely eat against
Yeah.
this Jets front seven. But we'll save some of that for Friday's preview show and in talking about our thoughts there. Let's move over to two guys I think that, for better or for worse, were duds in this game, and it's going to be two wide receivers. The first one here, I think we have to, this might be a little bit of a hot take, but Treylon Burks, I was not impressed or really, all that excited the way he was being used in this game. You look at the kind of two design plays that they ran to him, both being kind of those jet sweep motions, trying to get the ball in space to him. But when you give him the ball and you give him that opportunity, he still was not able to really, get upfield and do what we think Treylon Burks can do. And so when you have a guy like him, and you're designing some of these looks, taking it away from guys like Tyler Boyd, who has been this chain mover in a Brian Callahan offense, you have to ask yourself, how much is this going to continue for Treylon? And is it worth continuing trying to give him these looks when you have other guys like Tyler Boyd, like Chigakonkwo, like a Josh Wiley, who, may be able to find better success?
I thought the way they used Chigakonkwo on Sunday was how they were going to use Treylon Burks in this game, and it wasn't really the case at all. There was a lot of gadgety stuff. Didn't really look his way a whole lot. I'll give him credit. I think there were a couple of times that he was running routes that I had never really seen him run before. The joke was last year in Tim Kelly's offense, he dropped the ball, got in Vrabel's doghouse, and just ran clear out routes for the rest of the season, not being a focal point of the offense. Didn't really see a whole lot different in this game. It's like they're not really testing him and they're not really pushing the matchups that he had. They're trying to get him the ball in ways that aren't throwing it down the field to him. And I think you can glean a little bit of insight from that. I think that's meaningful. I was a little disappointed in how he was used, but also that he didn't really, I don't think he made the most of the opportunities he got when he got them either.
And I think that's a big point when you consider the other guy who I think is a dud for better for worse, DeAndre Hopkins in this game, kind of being on that limited pitch count. And, when he was in the game and Treylon was kind of playing that substitute role for him, both these guys just were not able to really do anything from their X position. I understand that DeAndre Hopkins, it's a dud of a game because he had one catch on one target, which good for him. He gets his consecutive game streak with a reception. He continues yet another game. Every game that he's played in, he's had at least one reception. So I think it's good for him. But I think the question was more so it's a dud because how much will this injury continue to linger before the snap count comes off? And was it really worth having DeAndre Hopkins in this game at all? Because having him out on the field, I think, when you do have him out on the field can bring such a presence to a defense. But when you're only keeping him on a pitch count like that, kind of tells the defense that he's not really that threat you think he is in that game. So I wonder how much that really helped the Tennessee offense for him to be out there.
Yeah, I don't know. I wonder how much of it was load management. Maybe they weren't going to design looks for him because they didn't want to test him. They just wanted him to be out there. Maybe it's a decoy. They're easing him into the season. I don't know. It could be a number of things, but it clearly looks like the bottom line is that the injury impacted his ability to find success on the field. And given how they used him and how they used Treylon Burks, who was supposedly his backup at the X position, maybe this is a bit too in the weeds. Maybe this is too nerdy of a question, but we know Brian Callahan likes the nerdy question. So if any of our friends in the media are watching, you have my permission to use this question. But I would want a little clarity on how he sees that X role within this offense and like what the primary responsibilities are for that particular role, because I couldn't find a lot on the tape. It was kind of confusing how they used that slot. And DeAndre Hopkins, does the injury factor into that? Does Treylon Burks' skill set factor into that? It just kind of seemed like a dud overall for the X position in this game.
Yeah, I agree full-heartedly with that. Kind of what you took away from him in that game. Stoney, did you have any other guys that you wanted to bring up that were notable guys who broke out, guys who you were kind of disappointed with? I know Jacob Sane in the comments here said, how did Kenneth Murray do on Sunday? For some reason, I didn't notice him much. He was a guy I think kind of surprised a lot of people in his play. I know you gave him some flowers there at the end of our defense discussion.
Man, he's all over the field making tackles. There were the big concern with him was coverage, and I thought there were a couple of plays where he was in coverage against, I think he was against Keenan Allen on a play in the flat where he caused the incompletion, forced the incompletion. So I thought he played pretty well. The other guy that I would mention as a stud was Roger McCreary. I thought Roger was great in this game, just fantastic. He does a lot of stuff that's not going to show up in the highlights, but sniffing out the screen, shedding the blocker to blow that thing up late in the game was fantastic work. They rushed him on a play that definitely impacted Caleb Williams' comfort level in the pocket. Didn't directly get pressure, didn't hit anybody, but just the threat of it seemed to kind of speed up the process for Caleb Williams. And then in coverage, I thought he was very sticky. He's the type of cornerback that he's quick in a phone booth. He will get in there, jam you up. And I thought he was particularly sticky. He didn't panic. Even when guys got around him, he was able to recover. On a deep shot down the field, Caleb Williams just heaves the ball into the end zone. Roger McCreary gets beat by a couple of yards on that play. By the time the play gets to the end zone, McCreary had made up those 2 yards, smothered his wide receiver from the back. That's what she said. I thought all in all, Roger McCreary looked like a superstar in this game when I was watching the tape.
Yeah, and that just goes to show when he's able to play that more inside nickel position, that's where he really thrives. And that's Bingo. What makes me so excited about him and his new role here. Now we can get to some of the comments here as we wrap up.
Let's do it.
As Jacob says here, McCreary starting off his all-pro campaign.
Why
right?
Not?
It's one of my biggest hot takes of the season. I'm glad to see that here. Tom, I think, brings up an interesting question. It's one that I've been dancing around this entire show, but he says, if Rudolph ends up playing and then they start winning, what does that mean for Levis? And I think my answer to this is that outside of an injury or this team starting 0-7-ish, I don't think we see Rudolph get a start for this team until then.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think they are going to get as long of a look at Levis as they possibly can. And if the decision is ultimately made to go with Rudolph, I think it's because Levis has probably already lost the job. And if he's already lost the job, then I don't think it matters if they're winning or losing games with Mason Rudolph at quarterback. I think they're going to be shopping at the position next spring.
I think so. And that's something that people are. I love the first week of football because there are teams like the Titans who are already getting mocked, those quarterbacks, and everybody is kind of has their hair on fire. And then you have teams like Carolina who also are getting mocked there, and it's like, what do you even do with them? That's another interesting one. It's like, great, well, we kind of have the quarterback, but now we're getting mocked another one. Like, that's just, week one is so interesting in that way. Awaken to the eternal.com in the comments here. One of the all-time MVP Hall of Fame names in the Hot Read podcast comment section here says, Levis was also negating the actual pocket. He was continually throwing the ball 5 yards further back than necessary instead of throwing from the actual pocket. I think this is an interesting point to bring up. It's something that the media also brought up with Brian Callahan, his ability to kind of drift out of the pocket. Did you notice any of that when you watch the All-22 back, and your thoughts on that, and how is that something that is also kind of fixable, or is it just kind of those game pressure nerves feeling, nervous in the pocket like that?
I think, first of all, it is a quality observation, awaken to the eternal.com. I noticed it as well. I also thought, in addition to the drifting in the pocket, I thought there were opportunities. I did like a 20-minute video on the offensive line yesterday for Stacking the Inbox. And there's a play in that video where I felt like Levis had opportunity to step up into the pocket and maybe make a better throw. And I don't know if it was a comfort thing or if it was just a muscle memory thing. Like, he just felt, I'm going to hit the last step in my drop and I'm just going to throw the ball or what. But the pressure was coming in. He could have stepped up, had a little more time to reset his feet and connect the throw, and he didn't do it. I think those are correctable things. it's a film room thing. It's a coaching thing. You've got to essentially just get it into your head to the point where it's automatic and you're not even thinking about it. Like you got to start doing those things. And what we know about Will Levis is that he is a hyper competitive guy, that he is pretty good work ethic wise. So, why not? I mean, the ingredients are there for him to do it. And if he doesn't do it, then I think it'll compound other issues, and we might be having different conversations, less optimistic conversations about him as the season progresses.
I do think that's something I do want to bring up. I do think there were some things in Will Levis's game that there is optimistic to be about. I think that this offense, I feel like we just spent 50 minutes just kind of going in on, I don't know how we feel. I think there were good things out of this game. The way that this offense was able to operate in the first half with that run game, and then being able to kind of throw it over the top to Calvin Ridley and get Tyler Boyd kind of involved moving those chains. That's the things you want to see this kind of offense operate. It's when you get behind and you're having not as much success, on those second and third downs, and you're taking Will Levis more in the shotgun there. That's where you start to see him kind of revert to last year's form. But there were a lot of good things. And I think AJ in the comments here says Levis's ceiling is massive, but the floor is super low. It's Callie's job to raise that floor higher. And I think that's, with this kind of installed new offense, the way they run the offense is how Callie raises his floor a little bit higher.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to what we're talking about here is Levis's ability as a runner. I thought was pretty well leveraged in this game. Yes. The designed run was effective, and there were a couple of times when the play broke down and he scrambled and picked up a couple of extra yards. I thought was a pretty good little wrinkle in this thing.
Yeah, I agree. And then the final one, maybe this was the whole thing to this entire game. Forrest R in the comments here says, petition to make Brian Callahan wear the plaid hat. Denard Wilson was cooking in that thing. Whether or not you think it's the greatest hat of all time or the worst of all time hat, I mean, there was something cooking there with that hat for sure.
I like it 100%. That's what I think it is. There's some magic with it. We need to get Brian Callahan.
We need to get Brian Callahan with the plaid hat. Well, that's just about the hour mark, and that's going to do it for our show today. I think we hit on a lot of the things we needed to with this team, and it's going to be very interesting to see how they kind of face this adversity this week in this matchup that they prepare to face off against Aaron Rodgers and the New York Jets, who will be just as much, they will be wanting this win just as much as the Titans this week. Once again, big thank you to Sinkers Beverages and Bluegrass Beverages, our title sponsor here on the show. Go check them out in East Nashville and Hendersonville. Search them on Uber Eats. Remember, they drive so you can drink. And that's going to be all from us today. We will see you on Friday when we are talking more Jets and Titans. But until then, we'll see you later.